Stress Level 0, or SLZ, has what is probably the most polished VR player of all time. Just moving around in Bonelab or Boneworks feels supremely good, and don't even get me started on actually playing them. Mwah, that shit is heavenly. There's a lot of behind the scenes polish that goes into making SLZ games feel so good. Grip smoothing so grabbing stuff looks nice, arm IK that looks extremely accurate, which is especially impressive when you realize that there's only 3 points of tracking to work with. Punching enemies causes a little shake to the limb you hit to add to the feeling of impact. The list of itty bitty details goes on and on and on, which makes it very clear why the Marrow interaction engine must have taken a long ass time to get feeling this spectacular. It feels like every decision was made with such immaculate care and attention that I could do a whole video on the spectacular player rig, and I probably will if I get off my ass and actually work on videos, so really, I probably won't. So with the context of everything is given such special care and attention, the decision for how finger tracking works in Boneworks and Bonelab makes no fucking sense to me, but it's not so cut and dry because I genuinely do not know if the way finger tracking is handled is a good or bad thing. I just really don't understand it. First of all, let's discuss specifically what finger tracking problem I'm referring to. Some of you may automatically assume I'm about to talk about the index not having pressure sensitivity, but the finger tracking quirk I'm actually talking about is for Quest and similar headsets specifically. First, let's take a look at the way fingers work on the Valve Index, where I think fingers are handled perfectly. Releasing the controller completely has an open palm, and when I squeeze the grip without touching the trigger, my middle, ring, and pinky finger go down. On Quest, when I squeeze the grip without touching the trigger, the same thing happens. This is all fine and dandy, but when we introduce the trigger into the equation, this is where things start to get weird. On the Valve Index, while squeezing the grip, if I rest my index finger on the trigger, this results in the player making a full fist ready to punch enemies. When I want to grab stuff out of my inventory, I'll click on the trigger on my index finger. This is perfect because I get to punch enemies without worrying about accidentally grabbing stuff out of my inventory, as the trigger press isn't required to make a full fist. Now, here on Quest, and by the way, when I say Quest, I mean any headset that has a similar controller layout, such as the PSVR 2 or any Rift headsets, etc. So on Quest, while holding the grip down, if I place my index finger on the trigger, the player does this. Well, what the fuck is that? This is technically accurate to where your fingers are on the controllers. However, I have a few issues with this. Because of this weird position, to make a full fist and get ready for a good punch, you're seemingly expected to hold down the trigger. I can understand wanting the player to hold the trigger on these headsets. It makes you feel more like you're actually making a real clenched fist. But by doing this, you'll grab stuff out of your inventory on accident pretty often. It should also be noted that you don't actually need to press the trigger down to register a punch, but that looks a little bit silly and doesn't give very good visual feedback for the player when you're punching like this. I made a tweet a while back asking you guys about why this decision may have been made, because with how polished the player rig is, this simply has to be intentional. Somebody did mention the clenching fist thing as well, but one very interesting reply was that other games do this and that it might be because the Quest 2 doesn't have full finger presence on the index finger like the Quest 3 does. Personally, I don't think that's what it is, because SLZ would be the studio to take advantage of the Quest 3's fingers and change it if they felt it was worth it. At least I think so, based off their IOBT decision. So let's try taking a better look at other games and see if we can maybe draw a parallel. Here's Batman Arkham Shadow. Punching enemies requires holding down grip and trigger at the same time, and does also have body holsters very similar to SLZ games. The thing about this game though is that grabbing stuff on your inventory requires that you actually don't press the trigger, which means throwing punches won't ever result in accidentally grabbing stuff. Hey editor, Bonelab here. I'm about to talk about how Job Simulator does the grip and trigger thing, but that's just not true. I had a Steam input binding on for it because I like having the trigger thing, which is, you know, the whole point of the video. So that's my bad on Job Sim, but I do, of course, think the point still stands. That's why the video is here today, regardless if it does or doesn't. You know, Job Sim is a much different game. It was kind of irrelevant in the first place. I'm not really sure why I added it, and I'm kind of rambling for no fucking reason. Here's Job Simulator, a game with no body holsters, and wouldn't you believe it, resting your finger on the trigger results in a closed fist. You're not exactly punching enemies though, so maybe this isn't a fair comparison. Here's Half-Life Alyx, another game where you're not punching enemies, but there's a lot more action, where the finger goes mostly all the way down, but does leave a little wiggle room for that last little trigger press. This game would still function the same if I were to theoretically throw a punch without pressing the trigger at all. It would still look nice in this game. So then why does SLZ specifically choose to have the player require a trigger press on Quest specifically? Well, it might be because it's Unity's default finger tracking thingy for Quest headsets, but the actual answer is I really don't know. It might be for that clenched fist feeling, but at the cost of inventory mishaps, I don't know if that's really a good idea. Maybe they find that it looks better to them when the controller and the fingers line up more, but then throwing a punch looks a little silly. Maybe they think it looks fine. Maybe it's an accident. I have no fucking idea. Regardless, let's take a look into a hypothetical world where the fingers function as I believe they should, using a mod by some cute and funny, not femboy, Minibattle, except the mod is like 2 lines of code and may as well have been made by some chopped, greasy, ugly fucking femboy, not swipes. And here we are, punching feels great, and inventory management works beautifully. I like this a lot more than how it was originally, and genuinely use this mod every time I play, like it is a requirement. And I'd like to clarify that this doesn't mean I think how it is originally is bad or anything, I just don't understand it is all. I could totally see somebody preferring and keeping their game the way it is now with the finger tracking on Quest. So let me ask something of SLZ. I may not understand the reasoning for having the finger tracking on Quest being the way it is, but I'll trust you guys' decision that you found it to be better and more preferable for the majority of people. I've seen a lot of people agree they prefer the way the mod works, but also a lot of people agree they prefer the way it is now. So my ask is really simple. I really think an option for choosing if you want the required trigger press would go a long way for Quest users, and I understand the want for less settings. That results in a more user-friendly experience. But if we have the setting for making walking a D-pad input for whatever reason, I see no reason that this finger tracking setting couldn't also be right there alongside it, especially if we're going from a scale of importance. I really don't want to boot up Boneworks Remastered and feel the fingers are off until a mod gets made to add such a simple setting. It really doesn't have to be this way, and I hope you hear my plea, because I think it makes a big difference to how good punching can feel for players. Ultimately though, only time will tell if we do get the finger tracking setting. Whether we do or don't, I completely understand. Maybe they don't find it as important as I do, which would really suck, but again, we'll just have to wait and see. You can get 10% off the entire Quest store using the link in the description. It's genuinely the best way to support the channel and is what puts food on my table. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my last one where we go over a big update coming to Bonelab Fusion. Some genuinely really exciting stuff there, especially if you're a Quest player. And with all of that out of the way, I hope you enjoyed this video and I will catch you in the next one. Bye-bye, fat bitches.